Hi friends, I am sharing with you today a little bit more from our book, How Not to Diet. And of course, as soon as I started talking, this noise started happening in the background. There's some house construction going on behind me. I've got a 2-month-old here next to me, and I wouldn't be surprised if my lawn care company showed up in the next couple of minutes to cut my grass. But we're gonna get this done. And despite all of these distractions, I am really excited and really impassioned about sharing so much of what I read from this book. It was a beast of a book. I've already covered one of the topics, just kind of took exercise and threw it into its own video. I'm going to do that again today. I'm going to share with you just a little bit about the beginning of the book where he covers the problem itself of the obesity epidemic. And then I'm going to share in another couple of videos some of the takeaways. So what can I do? What should I be eating? And how can I make this all work? So if you haven't already, check out the exercise video. The others will be upcoming. Like I said, lots of distractions and things that are keeping me from getting it in a timely manner, but I promise to get it to you because it's very it's very interesting and it's very important information. So whether it takes me 6 months or 6 years, I will get this information to you. I read 600 pages of this book and I will absolutely summarize it for you. So I know I've talked with many of you and I didn't realize so many of you guys were reading along with me, so that's wonderful. I would love to hear your all's feedback if you want to chat about it or you want to share some of your takeaways. I would love to see those in the comments. Like I said, we're going to tackle today just the overall problem. And I want to say right from the get-go, my hope for this section of the book is regardless of your perspective, what you're bringing into this today, whether you've struggled with obesity or you know someone that has, that you will find a new understanding and maybe a greater empathy for those who have struggled with obesity. So why is this happening? That's basically what we're covering today. So Jeff Novick, who's a registered dietitian, has a wonderful acronym. I think we talked about it a little bit in one of the comment sections a couple weeks ago, but his acronym for our American diet is CRAP. It is calorie rich and processed. So let's talk about that. Why is it so calorie rich? Condensing calories, we're removing fiber from foods. We're using concentration, crystallization, distillation, and extraction in order to make it extremely calorie dense. Now listen, if you put people in an MRI scanner, the same areas of the brain will light up. For food addicts, when you show them a chocolate milkshake. For cocaine addicts, when you show them a video of smoking crack. And for alcoholics, when you give them a whiff of whiskey. That should tell you just how addictive food can be. Now, he's very careful to say, look, it's not really food addiction. People aren't overeating cabbage. It's really a sugar and fat, a calorie density addiction. And I love this quote, and I hope that this stays with you because I think this is something that so many people don't recognize. Obesity is not some moral failing. Becoming overweight is a normal, natural response to the abnormal, unnatural ubiquity of calorie-dense, sugary, and fatty foods. And so then he dives into a couple different areas. He talks about genetics. He says, look, genetics play a role, but they shouldn't give a reason for resignation, but rather motivation to unseal your fate. We talked about that a little bit in the heart disease section as well, that our genetic history does play a role, but that it's not quite as influential as our diets. And he says when it comes to obesity, the power of our genes is nothing compared to the power of your fork. So I hope that can be motivation for folks who have felt just resigned to, well, this isn't my family history, it's what I'm going to deal with. But really to be able to use that as motivation to make their own changes and their own choices, their lifestyle changes, through lifestyle changes. So we're going to dive into a little bit of a comparison to tobacco over the next couple minutes. So remember, tobacco itself was just as addictive before and after mass marketing, but what changed was a greater opportunity or access for cheap and easy access. So hashtag mass production, right? So how does that relate to food? Well, we went from cooking everything from scratch in the kitchen to reheating everything. And so to these frozen meals that we can heat up, watching TV in the kitchen. And there are so many other elements at play when we're getting things that are already prepared for us. So let's talk about some of the politics behind that. U.S. taxpayers are unwittingly giving billions in subsidies to prop up the sugar, corn, soybean industries. So sugar, corn being high fructose corn syrup, and soybean being about half veggie oil and 50% animal feed. And then the sorghum industry, we've got $250 million going to them to feed all of our livestock that we're using as animal meat. So we've created a pricing structure that's favoring the production of sugars, oils, and animal products. Well, what does that mean for our overall food costs? Thanks to these subsidies, the meats, sweets, eggs, oil, dairy, and soda, that's all getting cheaper right around the time the obesity epidemic took off, while the costs of fresh fruits and vegetables are doubling. And at that same time, Americans' consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables fell dramatically from 42% to 26%, and that's servings a day. So that means for our stores, Whole Foods are now loss leaders, while the artificially flavored, colored, cheap ingredients and the ultra-processed, fatty, sugar-free salt concoctions are most profitable. So in the 80s, companies became responsible for producing profits for shareholders, removing their personal convictions in favor of investors. So if they had stopped marketing to kids or tried to sell healthier food, again, healthier food being loss leaders now, or they attempted anything that could jeopardize their quarterly profit growth, Wall Street could just demand a change in management. Proportions changed a little bit. McDonald's original sizes in 1955 have increased 250 to 500% for their burgers, fries, and soda. Marketing has changed dramatically. We tend to make more automatic, impulsive decisions triggered by unconscious cues or habitual patterns, especially when we're tired, stressed, or preoccupied. Well, they know that. That's their job to know that, and so they're taking advantage of those things. The unconscious parts of our brains are thought to guide human behaviors as much as 95% of the time. And I shared a little bit about this a couple weeks ago as well. And I know I've talked about discipline fatigue or decision fatigue. It's a questionable area. There are some who aren't sure if this really exists, but there are several studies that point to it being absolutely influential. And the idea is that we basically have a certain allotment of discipline that we're able to use, and once it's gone, we have no more to offer. And so they've studied this. I've shared other studies in the past, but in the study in the book referenced, they gave two groups a series of numbers to remember, and then they one of them was longer than the other. And then they asked those groups to make food choices. Well, the ones who had to remember the most numbers had less ability to be disciplined with regard to making a healthy food choice than the ones who had a shorter number to remember. There are suggestions that given the dire health consequences of our unhealthy eating habits, that marketing manipulations can kind of be compared to carcinogens and toxins in the air, invisible carcinogens, air and water that can poison us without our awareness. So we've got tons of concern and laws enacted based on the knowledge and awareness that those invisible carcinogens are polluting us and are affecting our health. Well, we also realize that marketing is also potentially invisibly polluting us, right? And so there are some, saying that should be held in the same, light. There's something that appetite psychologists, who knew there was an appetite psychologist, they believe called passive overconsumption. The idea is that, and it's evidenced by the overweight nutritionist, for instance, that the food environment may sometimes overcome our conscious controls over eating. So it suggests that there are aspects of our eating behaviors that are kind of flying under the radar of conscious awareness. So like I said, when you see an overweight nutritionist, it says there's got to be more at play than just knowing. And I've shared a bit about the book Switch by the Heath brothers before, but they talk about how, let's just imagine that there are two elements that we all have. We have a rider, a little guy who's kind of the analytical part of our brains, and then we have an elephant. The rider is kind of analytically controlling the elephant, but the elephant is the power. And so that kind of suggests that while the rider knows what's correct, he knows what we should be eating, the elephant's that emotional side that's saying, I know I should be eating that, but all I really want right now is a burger and ice cream and French fries. And so it's kind of just suggesting that marketing is kind of taking advantage of that elephant and kind of pulling them along. So we have a government of big food, by big food, and for big food. So reminiscent of the just what the doctor ordered cigarette ads of yesteryear. I don't know if any of you all are familiar with that. I studied them. I never saw them on the television. The American Academy of Family Physicians has accepted millions of dollars from the Coca-Cola Company. As they explain it, it's to explicitly develop consumer education content on beverages and sweeteners. And per the vice president of the American Academy of Pediatrics, they have relationships with Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and McDonald's. And so you just have to wonder what those relationships, how they're being influenced with regard to potentially not sharing something that they might otherwise share with their patients. The Director General of the World Health Organization concluded that the inability of countries around the world to turn the tide on obesity is not a failure of individual willpower, but rather a failure of political will to take on the powerful food and soda industries. Remember, the tobacco industry produces products that kill 1 in 2 of its most loyal customers. It's not about customer satisfaction, but shareholder satisfaction. So he goes on to share a whole bunch of different health concerns regarding our lifespan, dementia risks, cancer risks, and a whole host of other health-related concerns with regard to obesity. Suffice it to say that there are a lot of health concerns regarding obesity that you can definitely dive into more in the book, or you can reach out to me and I'd love to share some of that information specifically. I want to talk a little bit more about one section though, about provider accessibility. He shares a little bit about how physicians were contacted and basically they studied the physicians and they found that they were less likely to spend as much FaceTime with an overweight or obese patient as they were with a patient of normal weight, and that the emotional connection would also have been less, that they wouldn't have kind of connected or bonded during that visit as well. And you know, that's really tough to hear, that the people that are most influential to those who need insight and need knowledge and connections to resources might be the ones who are least likely to spend time, you know, giving that. And there are a lot of reasons why. In fact, I reached out to a nurse practitioner friend of mine just to get her opinion. She worked in a pediatric clinic for patients with high BMI, which is body mass index. And I just asked her what her thoughts were on kind of some of the reasons behind, you know, her patients' issues and why they would have, you know, struggled. And she named a couple. So she said children living in poverty often get most of their food from schools. And those schools might be underfunded. In fact, many of them are, and relying on funding from perhaps unhealthy food brands. You know, the chocolate milks that are being provided to the school and some of the other unhealthy junk foods they're donating to the schools, and they're putting their products in the schools as well. Health promotion from a public health standpoint, it's focusing more on education rather than helping to connect dots to resources. And there are reimbursement issues. We've talked about that before as well. The providers don't necessarily have the financial incentive, let alone the ability to be able to take the time that they need to give that kind of education and help them find those resources without having grants. And her, you know, to her point, it takes a long time to do the work to get a grant as well. There are biases from providers that don't necessarily or haven't been educated on some of the underlying issues that are going on at home for these children. You know, some of the environmental issues. And then there are food deserts, of course, as well, that a lot of these children are growing up in areas that they don't have ready access to fresh fruits and vegetables, not just at home, but in the community. And so that's a major issue that the public health community is trying to tackle as well, using food trucks. I know in my previous role, we tried to get fresh fruit delivered to different schools and have fresh food trucks that were available at lower costs, that members of the community could help subsidize some of the cost of that fresh fruit to be able to bring it to those food deserts as well. And then back to the book, he said physicians, they'd spend more time on that kind of education and those resource connections if their time was reimbursed appropriately. All right, so this section next, I'm kind of wrapping it up, but I do want to touch a bit about on this, and this was a really difficult section to read, honestly, and it kind of touches on the shame side of obesity. So obesity appears to be the only handicap where nearly everyone wants to switch disabilities, no matter the cost. One person in this study was quoted as saying, when you're blind, people want to help you, but no one wants to help you when you're fat. And so they researched people with different disabilities, and the only one of those disabilities that would switch to a different disability was obese patients. If shaming reduced obesity, there would be no fat people. That was a quote from the book. So here was the study done that I'm referencing. They gave hypothetical options to obese participants. It's called the multimillionaire option. Option 1, I would choose no money. The option was, if you could be a multimillionaire but stay obese, would you choose that? So option 1, I would have chosen no money and being normal weight, and it would have taken me 1 second to decide that. Option 2 was, I probably would have chosen being normal weight, but the possibility of having that much money would make me think twice about the choice. And then the final option was, I wanted to be normal weight, but I could really use the money. If I would be a multimillionaire, I think I could live with being morbidly obese. Nobody chose that last option. And of the participants, only one of them chose the option saying that they would choose to be normal weight, but they would have had to wait a second to make the choice. 99% of the participants in this research study said it wouldn't take me any time. I would absolutely choose being normal weight over the $1 million anytime. Wow. It really just helps to, like I said, to have some empathy for what their world must be like, to so easily know that they would rather be of normal weight than to have all their financial issues disappear. I just thought that was a really shocking and devastating study, to be honest with you. So then he covers a little bit about some of the benefits of weight loss. Modest weight loss can have major health benefits. The riskiest fat is the easiest to lose. Our bodies appear to preferentially shed the villainous visceral fat first. The 20% weight loss, 20% weight loss may increase quality of life. Disease risk decrease almost immediately by about 3 to 5%. Women between 25 and 65 lose approximately 13 pounds of bone and muscle as they age, and that could be why they quadruple their visceral fat stores, while men actually double their visceral fat stores. So his point is that weight loss, the first weight that we would lose would be that visceral, the more dangerous of the fats, and that's what our body's going to naturally take off first. He discusses some solutions, and he says, here are some of the things that are out there. I'm not going to dive too far into these, but he does touch on surgeries. And honestly, reading some of these, I don't know if I've shared this yet, but he talks about some of the surgeries that were allowed until the death rates became so dramatically high, or the devastating side effects that they found from some of these surgeries, some of these diet pills that are not even being tested, and it's really horrifying to look at. But you look back on that study, where people are choosing to be of normal weight rather than millionaires, multimillionaires, and you don't question why they would still choose some of these solutions that have such drastically terrible outcomes. He says he said, even in the modern field of bariatric medicine, there's an insidious image of sleaze, beguiled by advertising for fairy tale magic bullets of rapid, effortless weight loss. People blame themselves for failing to manifest the miracle, or imagine themselves to be broken. And that's just, again, it's just difficult to read that they believe this marketing, that it's just this fairy tale pill that will miraculously make it go away. And when it doesn't happen, then they think there must be something wrong. It must be me and not the pill and not the surgery. And that's one end of the spectrum. The other end is the overly pessimistic practitioners that are, well, people are born fat. There's nothing much they can do about it. And he says, look, the truth lies somewhere in between that. Again, touching on surgery just a little bit, the founding director of the Yale Griffin Prevention Research, he wrote, even if surgery proves sustainably effective, they need to rely on the rearrangement of the need to rely on the rearrangement of natural gastrointestinal anatomy as an alternative to better use of feet and forks, as in exercise and diet, seems a societal travesty. And so regarding surgery, patients overestimate the amount of weight they're going to lose, and they underestimate the difficulty of the recovering process. Unfortunately, bariatric patients are at increased risk of both depression and suicide after failed attempts at weight loss. So when you go back and you read that, people are, they're blaming themselves when it doesn't work, when in reality, if we were being truthful with the research behind many of these, they aren't designed to work. We haven't proved efficacy for many of these pills and many of these surgeries, but people are so desperate to lose the weight that they feel they can't do on their own, that they're taking that risk. So that's the bulk of what he shares, and he does touch on so many other things too that I just that I didn't feel like I could share today. But if you want to dive into more of any of those areas, I really do recommend that you check out that first chapter, that first section of the book. And he really opens up a ton of research and history on the diet and weight loss options of yesteryear, both in our country and around the world. And one interesting thing, and I think I quoted something on this topic a moment ago, but this is not an American issue. The obesity epidemic is worldwide, and that's where he's saying, look, there's no country that's doing this well. There's no country that's figuring this out and helping curb the tide of the obesity epidemic, which just helps us to see it's not an individual issue. It's not an individual willpower issue. There are so many elements at play, and unfortunately we are not addressing those elements well enough. Now, this may all sound like doom and gloom, there's nothing we can do, the marketing, the politics, the everything else. But the reality is the next section is where he talks about, yes, you can do something about it, and we've done a ton of research to help you figure out what it is. So I'm excited to share that with you. That's going to be in a separate video on the ingredients for the ideal weight loss diet, and I'm not afraid to share with you, because this is a plant-based group, to say that he will cover several different areas, several different diets and trends and lifestyle changes, but ultimately the one that has proven most successful is the whole foods plant-based diet. Spoiler alert, but you'll have to tune into that video to get all that information. If you haven't yet, please download the Daily Dozen. It is a free app that Dr. Greger put together based on the 12 kind of recommended daily dozen tips that he wants you to use from his book, How Not to Die. And there's a separate section on there on the app as well that we will cover in a video on additional little tips and tweaks and tricks that you can add if you have hit kind of a plateau, or if you're already eating a whole foods plant-based diet and you're not seeing the results that you thought you would, here are some extra little tips and tricks. I am certainly not doing them. The app is designed to be like if you could do every single thing right in the whole world, you would follow this app. So it's more of something to strive for than something you might attain every single day. But I'll share with you what I have added to my daily routine, and what I have found difficult and what I have found a simple switch that I'm now totally I'm doing every day without thought. So I'm really excited to share that with you too. Hopefully not too long from now, but we'll see how things go with the children, with the construction and my phone not dying. We will get it done, and I can't wait to wrap up this book with you guys and to dive into the next one, which I might not put a deadline on for myself, because that has been the hardest part for me, because I'm a type A and I want to meet deadlines. But I appreciate you guys watching this, and I hope if you have any comments, let me know in the comment section. Feel free to send me a private message if you want to dive into a section a little bit deeper. And if you're reading along, let me know what your biggest takeaways from the first section were as well. All right, take care.